Chapter 7 of Galactic Patrol by E. Smith. Chapter 7. With Warsaw in the lead, the three interlopers hastened along a corridor, past branching and intersecting hallways, to a distant wing of the structure. There, it was evident, manufacturing of weapons was carried on, but a quick study of the queer-looking devices and mechanisms upon the benches and inside the storage racks lining its walls convinced Kinnison that the room could yield them nothing of permanent benefit. There were high-powered beam projectors, it was true, but they were so heavy that they were not even semi-portable. There were also hand weapons of various peculiar patterns, but without exception they were ridiculously inferior to the delaminators of the patrol, in every respect of power range, controllability, and storage capacity. Nevertheless, after testing them out sufficiently to make certain of the above findings, Kinnison selected an armful of the most powerful models, and turned to his companions. "Let's go back to the power room," he urged. "I'm nervous as a cat. I feel stark naked without my batteries, and if anyone should happen to drop in there and do away with them, we'd be sunk without a trace." Loaded down with Dalgonian weapons, they hurried back the way they'd come. Much to Kinnison's relief, he found that his forebodings had been groundless. The batteries were still there, still absorbing myriawatt hour after myriawatt hour from the Dalgonian generators. Staring fixedly at the innocuous-looking containers, he frowned and thought. "Better we insulate those leads a little heavier and put the cans back in our armor," he suggested finally. "They'll charge just as well in place, and it doesn't stand to reason that this drain of power can go on for the rest of the night without somebody noticing it. And when that happens, those overlords are bound to take plenty of steps, the nature of none of which we can even guess at." "We must have power enough now so that we can fly away from any possible trouble," Warsaw suggested. "But that's exactly what we're not going to do," Kinnison declared with finality. "Now that we've found a good charger, we aren't going to leave it until our accumulators are chock-a-block. It's coming in faster than full draft will take it out, and we're going to get a full charge if we have to stand off all the vermin of Delgon to do it." Far longer than Kinnison had thought possible they were unmolested, but finally a couple of Dalgonian engineers came to investigate the unprecedented shortage in the output of their completely automatic generators. At the entrance they were stopped, for no ordinary tools could force the barricade Van Buskirk had erected behind that portal. With leveled weapons the patrolmen stood, awaiting the expected attack, but none developed. Hour by hour the long night wore away, uneventfully. At daybreak, however, a storming party appeared, and massive battering rams were brought into play. As the dull, heavy concussions reverberated throughout the building, the patrolmen each picked up two of the weapons piled before them, and Kinnison addressed the Valancian. "Drag a couple of those metal benches across that corner and coil it behind them," he directed. "They'll be enough to ground any stray charges. If they can't see you, they won't know you're there, so probably nothing much will come your way direct." The Valancian demurred, declaring that he would not hide while his two companions were fighting his battle. But Kinnison silenced him fiercely. "Don't be a fool," the Lensman snapped. "One of those beams would fry you to a crisp in 10 seconds, whereas the defensive fields of our armor could neutralize 1,000 of them from now on. Do as I say, and do it quick, or I'll beam you unconscious and toss you in there myself." Realizing that Kinnison meant exactly what he said, and knowing that unarmored as he was utterly unable to resist either the Tellurian or their common foe, Warsaw unwillingly erected his metallic barrier and coiled his sinuous length behind it. He hid himself just in time. The outer barricade had fallen, and now a wave of reptilian forms flooded into the control room. Nor was this any ordinary investigation. The overlords had studied the situation from afar, and this wave was one of heavily armed for Delgon soldiery. On they came, projectors fiercely aflame, confident in their belief that nothing could stand before their blasts. But how wrong they were! The two repulsively erect bipeds before them neither burned nor fell. Beams, no matter how powerful, did not reach them. Nor were these outlandish beings inoffensive. utterly careless of the service life of the pitifully weak Dalgonian projectors. They were using them at maximum drain and extreme aperture, and in the resultant beams the Dalgonian soldier slaves fell in scorched and smoking heaps. On came reserves, platoon after platoon, only and continuously to meet the same fate, for as soon as one projector weakened, the invincibly armored man would toss it aside and pick up another. But finally the last commandeered weapon was exhausted, and the beleaguered pair brought down their own delameters, the most powerful portable weapons known to the military scientists of the Galactic Patrol, into play. And what a difference! In those beams the attacking reptiles did not smoke or burn. They simply vanished in a blaze of flaming light. So did also the nearby walls and a good share of the building beyond. The Dalgonian hordes having disappeared, Van Buskirk shut off his delameter. Kinnison, however, left his on, angling its beams sharply upward, blasting into fiery vapor the ceiling and roof over their heads, remarking, "While we're at it, we might as well fix things so we can make a quick getaway if we want to." Then they waited, watching the needles of their meters creep ever closer to the full charge marks. Waited while, as they shrewdly suspected, the distant cowardly hiding overlords planned some other more promising line of physical attack. Nor was it long in developing. Another small army appeared, armored this time, or more accurately, advancing behind metallic shields. Knowing what to expect, Kinnison was not surprised when the beam of his delameter not only failed to pierce one of those shields, but did not in any way impede the progress of the Dalgonian column. "Well, we're all done here anyway, as far as I'm concerned," Kinnison grinned at the Dutchman as he spoke. "My cans have been showing full back pressure for the last 5 minutes. How about yours?" "Same here," Van Buskirk reported, and the two leaped lightly into the Valantians' refuge. Then, inertialess all, the three shot into the air, at such a pace that to the slow senses of the Dalgonian slaves they simply disappeared. Indeed, it was not until the barrier had been blasted away, and every room, nook, and cranny of the immense structure had been literally and minutely combed, that the Dalgonians, and through their enslaved minds the overlords, became convinced that their prey had in some uncanny and unknown fashion eluded them. Now high in the air, the three troopers traversed, in a matter of minutes, the same distance that had cost them so much time and strife the day before. Over the monster-infected forest they sped, over the deceptively peaceful green lushness of the jungle, to slant down toward Worsel's thought-proof tent. Inside that refuge they snapped off their thought screens, and Kinnison yawned prodigiously. Working days and nights both is all right for a while, but it gets monotonous in time. Since this seems to be the only really safe spot on the planet, I suggest that we take a day or so off and catch up on our eats and sleeps. They slept and ate again. "The next thing on the program," Kinnison announced then, "is to clean out that den of overlords. Then Worsel will be free to help us get going about our own business." "You speak lightly indeed of the impossible." Worsel, again all glum despondency, reproved him. "I've already explained why the task is, and must remain, beyond our power." "Yes, but you don't quite grasp the possibilities of the stuff we've got to work with now," the Tellurian replied. "Listen, you could never do anything because you couldn't see through or work through your thought screens. Neither we nor you could, even now, enslave a Dalgonian and make him lead us to the cavern, because the overlords would know all about it way ahead of time, and the slave would lead us anywhere else except to the cavern. However, one of us can cut his screen and surrender, possibly keeping just enough screen up to keep the enemy from possessing his mind, fully enough to learn that the other two are coming along. The big question is, which of us is to surrender?" "That is already decided," Worsel made instant reply. "I am the logical, in fact the only one to do it. Not only would they think it perfectly natural that they should overpower me, but also I am the only one of us three sufficiently able to control his thoughts, so as to keep them from the knowledge that I am being accompanied. Furthermore, you both know that it would not be good for your minds, unaccustomed as they are to the practice, to surrender their control voluntarily to an enemy. I'll say it wouldn't, Kinnison agreed feelingly. I might do it if I had to, but I wouldn't like it, and I don't think I'd ever quite get over it. I hate to put such a horrible job off on you, Worsel, but you're undoubtedly the best equipped to handle it, and even you may have your hands full. Yes, the Valantian said thoughtfully. While the undertaking's no longer an absolute impossibility, it is difficult, very. In any event, you will probably have to beam me yourselves, if we succeed in reaching the cavern. The overlords will see to that. If so, do it without regret. Know that I expect it, and am well content to die in that fashion. Thousands of better men than I am would be only too glad to be in my place, meaning what it does to all Valantia. Know also that I've already reported what is to occur, and that your welcome to Valantia is assured, whether or not I accompany you there. I don't think I'll have to kill you, Worsel, Kinnison replied, slowly, picturing in detail exactly what that steel-hard reptilian body would be capable of doing when unshackled, its directing mind was completely taken over by an utterly soulless and conscienceless overlord. If we can't keep from going off the deep end, of course, you'll get pretty tough, and I know that you're hard to handle. However, as I told you back there, I think I can beam you unconscious without killing you. I may have to burn off a few scales, but I'll try not to do any damage that can't be repaired. If you can stop me, it will be wonderful indeed. Are we ready? They were ready. Worsel opened the door, and in a moment was hurtling through the air, his giant wings arrowing him along at a pace no winged creature of earth would even approach. And following him easily at a little distance, floated the two patrolmen along their inertialess drives. During that long flight scarcely a thought was exchanged, even between Kinnison and Van Buskirk. To direct a thought at the Valantian was, of course, out of the question. All lines of communication with him had been cut, and furthermore his mind, able as it was being taxed to the ultimate cell in doing what he'd set out to do. And the two patrolmen were reluctant to converse with each other, even upon their tight beams, radios, or sounders, for fear that some slight leakage of thought energy might reveal their presence to the ever-watchful overlords. If this opportunity were lost, they knew, another chance to wipe out that hellish horde might never present itself. Land was traversed, and sea, but finally a stupendous range of mountains reared before them, and Worsel, folding back his tireless wings, shot downward in a screaming, full-weight dive. In his line of flight, Kinnison saw the mouth of a cave, a darker spot of blackness in the black rock of the mountain's side. Upon the ledged approach there lay a Dalgonian, a guard or lookout, of course. The Lensman's delameter was already in his hand, and at sight of the guardian reptile he sighted and fired in one incredibly fast motion. But rapid as it was still too slow. The overlords had seen that the Valantian had companions, of whom he had been able to keep them in ignorance theretofore. Instantly Worsel's wings again began to beat, bearing him off at a wide angle. And although the patrolmen were insulated against his thought, the meaning of his antics was very plain. He was telling them in every possible way that the hole below was not the cavern of the overlords, that it was over this way, that they were to keep on following him to it. Then, as they refused to follow him, he rushed upon Kinnison in mad attack. "Beat him down, Kim," Van Buskirk yelled. "Don't take any chances with that bird." He leveled his own delameter. "Lay off, Bus," the Lensman snapped. "I can handle him. A lot easier out here than on the ground." And so it proved. Inertialess as he was, the buffetings of the Valantian affected him not at all. And when Worsel coiled his supple body around him and began to apply pressure, Kinnison simply expanded his thought screen to cover them both, thus releasing the mind of his temporarily inimical friend from the overlord's grip. Instantly the Valantian became himself, snapped on his own shield, and the three continued as one their interrupted downward course. Worsel came to a halt upon the ledge, beside the practically incinerated corpse of the lookout, knowing, unarmored as he was, that to go farther meant sudden death. The armored pair, however, shot on into the gloomy passage. At first they were offered no opposition. The overlords had had no time to muster an adequate defense. Scattering handfuls of slaves rushed them, only to be blasted out of existence as their hand weapons proved useless against the armor of the Galactic Patrol. Defenders became more numerous as the cavern itself was approached, but neither were they allowed to stay the patrolmen's progress. Finally, a palely shimmering barrier of metal appeared to bar their way. Its fields of force neutralized or absorbed the blasts of the delameters, but its material substance offered but little resistance to a 30-pound sledge swung by one of the strongest men ever produced by any planet colonized by the humanity of Earth. Now they were in the cavern itself, the sanctum sanctorum of the overlords of Delgon. There was the hellish torture screen, with its burden of mental and physical pain. There was the horribly avid audience, now milling about in a mob frenzy of panic. There, upon a raised balcony, were the big shots of this nauseous clan, now doing their utmost to marshal some force able to cope effectively with this unheard-of violation of their age-old immunity. A last wave of Delgonian slaves hurled themselves forward, futile projectors furiously aflame, only to disappear in the delameter's fans of force. The patrolmen hated to kill those mindless slaves, but it was a nasty job that had to be done. The slaves out of the way, those ravening beams bored on into the massed overlords. And now, Kinnison and Van Buskirk killed, if not joyously, at least relentlessly, mercilessly, and with neither sign nor sensation of compunction. For this unbelievably monstrous tribe needed killing, root and branch. Not a scion or shoot of it should be allowed to survive, to continue to contaminate the civilization of the galaxy. Back and forth, to and fro, up and down, swept the raging beams of the delameters, playing on until, in all the vast volume of that gruesome chamber, nothing lived save the two grim figures in its portal. Assured of this fact, but with delameters still in hand, the two destroyers retraced their way to the tunnel's mouth, where Warsaw anxiously awaited them. Lines of communication again established, Kinnison informed the Valencian of all that had taken place, and the latter gradually cut down the power of his thought screen. Soon it was at zero strength, and he reported jubilantly that for the first time in untold ages, the overlords of Delgon were off the air. "But surely the danger isn't over yet," protested Kinnison. "We couldn't have got them all in this one raid. Some of them must have escaped, and there must be other dens of them on this planet somewhere." "Possibly. The Valencian waved his tail airily, the first sign of joyousness he had shown. "But their power is broken, definitely and forever. With these new screens, and with the arms and armament which, thanks to you, we can now fabricate, the task of wiping them out completely will be comparatively simple. Now you will accompany me to Valentia, where, I assure, the resources of the planet will be put solidly behind you in your own endeavors. I've already summoned a spaceship. In less than 12 days we will be back in Valentia and at work upon your projects. In the meantime—" 12 days? Holy jumping rockets!" Van Buskirk exploded. Kinnison said, "Sure, you forget that they know nothing of our free drive. We'd better hop over and get our lifeboat, I think. It's not so good either way, but in our own boat we'll be open to detection less than 2 hours, as against 12 days in the Valencians. And the pirates may be here any minute. It's as good as certain that their ship will be stopped and searched long before it gets back to Valentia, and if we were aboard it would be just too bad." "And since the crew knows about us, the pirates soon will, and it'll be just too bad anyway," Van Buskirk reasoned. "Not at all," interposed Warsaw. "The few of my people who know of you have been instructed to seal that knowledge. I must admit, however, that I am greatly disturbed by your conceptions of these pirates of space. You see, until I met you I knew nothing more of the pirates than I did of your patrol." "What a world!" Van Buskirk exclaimed. "No patrol and no pirates. But at that, life might be simpler. Without both of them, and without the free space drive. More like it used to be in the good old airplane days that the novelists rave about. Of course, I could not judge as to that. The Valanchian was very serious. This in which we live seems to be an out-of-the-way section of the galaxy. Or it may be that we have nothing that the pirates want. More likely, it's simply that, like the patrol, they haven't got organized into this district yet, suggested Kinnison. There are so many millions of solar systems in the galaxy that it will probably be thousands of years yet before the patrol gets into them all. But about these pirates, Worsel went back to his point. If they have such minds as those of the overlords, they will be able to break the seals of our minds. However, I gather from your thoughts that their minds are not of that strength. Not as far as I know, Kinnison replied. You folks have the most powerful brains I ever heard of, short of the Eurasians. And speaking of mental power, you can hear thoughts a lot farther than I can, even with my lens or with this pirate receiver I've got. See if you can find out whether there are any pirates in space around here, will you? While the Valanchian was concentrating, Van Buskirk asked, Why, if his mind is so strong, could the overlords put him under so much easier than they could us weak-minded humans? You're confusing mind with will, I think. Ages of submission to the overlords made the Valanchians' willpower 0, as far as the bosses were concerned. On the other hand, you and I could raise stubbornness to sell to most people. In fact, if the overlords had succeeded in really breaking us down back there, I believe that we would have been insane for the rest of our lives. Probably you're right. We break, but we don't bend, huh? Then the Valanchian was ready to report. I've scanned space to the nearer stars, some 11 of your light years, and have encountered no intruding entities, he announced. 11 light years? What a range, Kinnison exclaimed. However, that's only a shade over 2 minutes for a pirate ship at full blast. We've got to take a chance sometime, and the quicker we get started, the sooner we'll get back. We'll pick you up here, Worsel. No use in you going back to your tent. We'll be back here long before you could reach it. You'll be safe enough, I think, especially with our spare delameters. Let's get going, Bus. Again they shot into the air. Again they traversed the airless depths of interplanetary space. To locate the temporary tomb of their lifeboat required only a few minutes. To disinter her, only a few more. Then again they braved detection in the void. Kinnison tense at his controls. Van Buskirk in strained attention, listening to and staring at his unscramblers and detectors. But the ether was still blank as they materialized in an inertialess landing beside the waiting Valanchian. All right, Worsel, snap it up, Kinnison called, and went on to Van Buskirk. Now, you big flat-footed Valerian space hound, I hope that spaceman's god of yours will see to it that our luck holds good for just 7 minutes more. We've had more luck already than we had any right to expect, but we can put a little more to the most gosh-awful good use. No big Shim-King does bring spaceman luck, insisted the giant, grimacing a peculiar salute toward a small golden image set inside his helmet. And the fact that you warty, runty little space fleas of Tellus haven't got enough sense to know it doesn't change matters at all. That's telling him, Bus, Kinnison applauded. But if it helps charge your batteries, go to it, ready to blast. Lift! The Valanchian had come aboard. The tiny airlock was again tight, and the little vessel shot away from Delgon toward far Valantia. And still the ether remained empty as far as the detectors could reach. Nor was this fact surprising, in spite of the Lensmen's fears to the contrary, for the patrolmen had given the pirates such an extremely long line to cover that many days must yet elapse before the minions of Boskoni would get around to visit that unimportant, unexplored, and almost unknown solar system. En route to his home planet, Worsel got in touch with the crew of the Valanchian vessel already in space, ordering them to return to port post-haste, and instructing them in detail what to think and how to act should they be stopped, and searched by one of Boskoni's raiders. By the time these instructions had been given, Valantia loomed large beneath the flying midget. Then, with Worsel as guide, Kinnison drove over a mighty ocean, upon whose opposite shore lay the great city in which Warsaw lived. "But I would like to have them welcome you as befits what you've done, and have you go to the dome," mourned the Valancian. "Think of it! You've done such a thing which for ages the mass power of the planet has been trying vainly to accomplish, and yet you insist that I alone take full and complete credit for it." "I don't insist on any such thing," argued Kinnison, "even though it's practically all yours anyway. I insist only on you keeping us and the patrol out of it, and you know as well as I do why you've got to do that. Tell them anything else you want to. Say that a couple of pink-haired Chickaladorians helped you, and then beat it back home. That planet's far enough away so that if the pirates chase them, they'll get a real run for their money. After this blows over you can tell the truth, but not until then. And as for us going to the dome for grand hocus pocus, that is completely and definitely out. We're not going anywhere except to the biggest space yard you've got. You're not going to give us anything except a lot of material and a lot of highly trained help that can keep their thoughts sealed. You've got to build a lot of heavy stuff fast, and we got to get started on it just as quickly as the gods of space will let us." End of chapter 7.